The purpose of this video is to run through a comparison of basically Ethernet communication on older Siemens PLCs like an S7300, and then compare it to the OPC UA enabled Siemens PLCs such as the 1200 and the 1500, and just basically point out kind of security issues that exist, and the real advantage of using OPC UA and kind of going down that road. So what I'll do is I'll open up a project where I'm looking at the S7300 and then look at the options then around Ethernet communications in the 1200. So in a 300, I'll just kind of click into this 300 here. Most of the 300s that I would have seen either had this inbuilt Ethernet port if the CPU was, within a kind of a narrow range, or there would be an additional Ethernet card on the side. And essentially, this Ethernet card, it basically used something called put-get to allow communications on the outside as such. So the Ethernet card effectively allowed, say, a data historian or some kind of SCADA system, read values and kind of poll back values intermittently. And if I go in, say, for example, to the card itself, what you'll see here is kind of like a description. You'll see send, receive, fetch, write, and put, get, etc. Were kind of the methods that were there. The problems always with them was with these methods and with those cards in the more modern age is that people would actually be able to write an application to force a value to be something, and especially if someone wrote some kind of malware, and they knew what they were doing, they would be able to actually go and create problems effectively with the PLC. So if we go then, say for example, to the more modern PLC, of which this guy is the 1200, you'll see that there's options within TIA which aren't, there for the older Siemens PLCs, and in particular, it's this guy OPC UA. Right, so OPC UA essentially is something that you can select on, and then what you can do is you can say, look, we have a port, and then basically in the security section, you're able to come down and you're able to actually encrypt the actual communication. So the communication for the S7300 was open; it would be able to be read by another program. But here, you've basically got the actual packets as they go over the network. They're encrypted. And then the more important thing here is that you're actually able to have users where, effectively, you have to supply, you have to want to do something, but you have to supply a username and a password. And then you get into areas like, say, where you have to supply certificates and so on. So it's a case where security that would have been very much a norm for someone who was doing a kind of some form of website on a web server, that now has been brought forward kind of into the PLC world as such. Okay, so where this would kind of be a norm, right, and where I see this kind of being practical in a manufacturing sense, I will open up a kind of an architecture here. And what would be very normal is that, say, for example, here you have a whole series of Siemens PLCs, and basically the Siemens PLCs, they effectively are out in the field. You've got a whole, a number of pieces of equipment. And here, say, for example, you have this OPC server here. And if you go into the OPC server, I'll just do something very simple as an example. I'll show that I have a copy of Kepware, and Kepware is pointing down to a particular PLC, and it happens to match the guy that I was looking at previously. So if I say, for example, if I go in here to this particular PLC, and if I just go down, and if I just open up a particular data block, which is here just as an example, Here I'll just see that there's a number of parameters for this temperature control unit. And if I go back then to the, sorry, I'll go back to the OPC server. That's what I meant to do. If I go in here and I just take a look at this Kepware installation, you'll see Siemens TCP/IP Ethernet, and that is effectively using the old method, right? It means that Kepware itself is going down to take a look at the PLC, but using the open method. And you can come in here and you can actually, unfortunately, you can actually modify values. So I'll give an example of that. Let's just say I go in here to the quick client, right? And I open this guy up here and say I have a target temperature. Now here's a kind of a custom application. So I'll just bring him down there. Sorry, 2 seconds there. So here's a kind of a custom application. And here I can see that like there's a value of 60, and this application happens to work off kind of put get. So if I want to change the value here to say 51, if I go write value, then I will see in the OPC server that the value that I've written in has just gone through. And that came from an application that was external to Kepware and external to the PLC. So that means that you have the basis of actually being able to disrupt basically disrupt values and intent, in terms of like recipe parameters and so on. So effectively, it means that when you're actually setting up values and you're going to reach down to a particular PLC, in the past, you would go into the channel and you would effectively select from the drivers of which are here. But realistically, in the modern age, what you should really be doing, if you're going to have a middleware application such as Kepware, you should go down for something like the OPC UA client. And then you would effectively say, in this case here, maybe S7 1200. You would go in and then you would literally reach out to your particular PLC. Okay, so, and it would then fold back to, say, for example, if I go up to the actual the PLC itself, and if I go down to OPC UA here, that I would literally match up the settings and the actual port numbers which are there, and you can effectively still have Kepware as your middleware application. But the problem primarily comes down to here. It comes down to the OPC server down to the PLC, not the actual, third-party applications like the Historian coming in to talk to the OPC server. Because where this can become very confusing is basically where you are here, and you can focus very much on Kepware. And you can go into, say, for example, if I go down to Kepware here, and if you focus in on the OPC UA configuration, what you can do is you can look at the OPC UA configuration from the Kepware side. But realistically, you should be looking at it from the PLC side, really, when it comes down to it, because that's where the problem primarily exists. You can also then get your application to go directly out to the PLC, which is kind of something that I'll set up on another video. So it's kind of a case there where it should really be a focus for people to look at the communications from here down to here, not just simply from, say, for example, from maybe some kind of SCADA system to here and the Historian system over to here also. Thank you very much.